And there we go. This was the video title that caught my eye. Well, there was two from the same creator, actually, that caught my eye. And one was, why Wuthering Waves is a wake-up call that saved Gacha? And why Wuthering Waves is a huge wake-up call for your Gacha? Which kind of sounds like the same thing, really. But, I can't...
After Gacha break the mainstream in 20...
Pause! Should we watch it, guys? Because I'm curious. We got these two, right? We're going to watch the newest one. Now, I've never seen anything from this creator, right? But I think I'm going to disagree with the video, right? Because of the title. Wuthering Waves is a huge wake-up call for your Gacha. And then there's the other title from a month ago. Why Wuthering Waves is a wake-up call that saved Gacha. Now, of course, these could just be titles, and I guess we'll find out, just to pull us in. And hey, it's pulled me in. It's done its job. But I just wanted to watch this because I think I'm going to disagree with this video quite a lot, which is totally fine. We can do that respectfully, can't we? Because I don't necessarily agree with either of these statements. Why Wuthering Waves is a wake-up call that saved Gacha, or a wake-up call for your Gacha. Because Wuthering Waves is a great game, and in terms of production quality, as I've just said, it's up there. It's probably in the top 3. You can argue which one you consider as 1, 2, and 3. But for me, Wua, ZZZ, and Enfield are the highest production quality Gacha games that we have at the moment in terms of the 3D space. You know, I'm talking visuals. I'm talking, you know, that side of things, the fidelity side of things, like music and all that sort of stuff aside. I'm talking pure graphical fidelity here. Now, I would argue, in my personal opinion, I think Enfield is a better looking game just from raw graphics. I think Wua has it in the lighting, but that's Unreal Engine, right? Lighting carries Unreal Engine games. But when it comes to the rest of the game, I don't necessarily think Wuthering Waves is a wake-up call for Gacha in general, because it's not doing anything new. It's doing the Hoyo system just a little bit better. It's doing the Hoyo way of patches just a little bit better, you could argue, but I think that's more of a subjective personal opinion, right? It's doing events in a very normal Gacha way. I'd argue, I think, quite weakly, personally, for what I like out of Gacha games. Its endgame is Hoyo endgame. That, in my opinion, the Tower of Adversity and Wua are just not great endgames. The story, in my opinion, again, personal opinion, it's not anything to write home about, especially when you compare it to titles like Arknights and Limber's Company. It just doesn't hold a torch to them. Now, you might like it, and it might have its moments, which it has had its moments. I was a big fan of 1.1, actually. But I just don't think that Wua is a wake-up call for your Gacha beyond its success. Now, that's a different question. If we talk about the business side of things, of course, market leaders are leaders for a reason and people follow. But I'd also argue, is Wuthering Waves a market leader? We know on mobile it's not. We could argue potentially on PC and console, maybe it is. But is it truly? So I thought we'd watch this video. Wuthering Waves is a huge wake-up call for your Gacha, because just on the title alone, I think I actually disagree. So I'm curious to see what this person's got to say then. But guys, go check out Noel. Show them some love. We're going to drop it a preemptive like. If the video's terrible, maybe we'll take it back. But I'm sure this is a great video. But yeah, the title is screaming out to me. So let's check it out then, shall we?
After Gacha break the mainstream in 2020, it creates one issue. Everything looks the same. Now,
I just said I was going to disagree. I agree with that. People talk about the AAA space and the mainstream Gacha gaming market, right? It's lost its creativity. Everybody's copying everybody. True, for the most part. I think we're in that same point in the Gacha space at the minute. Since Genshin, everybody wanted to be the next Genshin, didn't they? That's what we've got. And look, what I call rotation slop. And I am happy to see more and more people, again, a little bit fatigued by rotation slop gameplay now, because I was speaking about this quite a while ago and people kind of pushed back against me about it, that after Wua, I said, we're going to get so many other games trying to catch this sort of style of gameplay. And look at what we've got coming over the next year or two. We've got a lot of games that look very, very similar in terms of the combat, right?
Without realizing, industry has been stuck in a loop for years because being familiar feels safer than being different. New titles are doing what other gacha are famous for. Until 735 days ago, Wuthering Waves make things make sense again. They experiment, they
Experiment. Okay, I'm gonna let them cook there, because where do they experiment for me? I think they do the Hoyo model, but just arguably, a lot of people would say, better, right? That's how I see it anyway. Now, they are different games. Playing Genshin and playing Wuthering Waves are quintessentially different games, but they are very similar in a lot of ways as well, right? I don't think Wuthering Waves... what you can always say, for me, you either do something unique or you do something that somebody else is doing, but better. Now, you could definitely argue the latter there, right? That they're doing the same, but better. But I don't think it's somehow different, personally.
fail, but somehow they landed on the second anniversary with more than just surviving. So how did Wuthering Waves reach this level of success in this hyper-competitive market?
Yeah, that's true. It is a hyper-competitive market, and now they have the backing of Tencent as well, which is major. Absolutely massive.
There's a term called fast follower strategy, where developers take already proven formulas and repackage them for a growing audience. In gacha industry, this became
and I would argue Wuthering Waves did that.
Extremely common because familiarity makes games easier to approach for new players, and it also shifts player psychology from "is this game actually good" to "who does it better." But
you look at the UIs in most gacha games, they kind of have a familiar sense to them, don't they? That's all by design.
Here's the thing, over time, that strategy creates its own problem. As tribalism grows deeper in gacha space, new games started getting labeled as cheap knockoffs almost instantly. And worse, copying an already established ecosystem rarely leads to the same.
It's fascinating to me now that this was what was targeted at Wuthering Waves when it first came out, right? The community that rallied against that is now doing that to every other game, but they're not wrong, and it wasn't that they were wrong before as well. Copying's probably strong, right? It's iterations, right? Being iterative doesn't necessarily mean you're unique, though. But at the same time, I'm always of the argument, hey, if you can copy somebody's own work and get a better grade, you know?
Success because players don't abandon years of progress for something that feels almost identical.
True.
And that's where the real limitation of this strategy begins to show, and where Wuthering Waves take a different direction.
Okay.
They focus on delivering an actual experience. And here's the thing, when we talk about experience, many people will usually mention the in-game side of Wuthering Waves. The combat is impactful, exploration feels...
The combat is good. I think the combat for me hasn't progressed. Again, I have to say this because people get mad. I have stopped playing the game, right? But I'll keep up on things here and there. I do think the combat, I would have hoped it would have gone in a slightly different direction. I think it's become more restrictive than what I would have liked it to have become. I was hoping it, but I think Enfield might suffer the same fate, right? I think all action gacha games probably will end up suffering the same fate unless they do something unique, that they will inevitably become a little bit more restrictive. But yeah, I do think Wua did, which I wish it hadn't have done. The combat in itself is great. I just don't think it gets shown off to the best of its ability. It deserves better than Terror of Adversity, and it deserves better than Wua. Like, the combat itself, for me, is that good that it deserves better than what it's got. I feel like the combat did dirty by the game modes themselves.
Smooth and etc. And I can understand that, especially after Renacita and Lahai Roy, that become one of the biggest reasons why Wuthering Wave got this far. But
hey, I'll maybe skip past the exploration side of things, right? I think people know my views on where we went in exploration. I refer you back to my bike take video, which I don't think I need to go too much into.
But is that everything? Because if we talk about FTUE, first time user experience, Wuthering Waves honestly didn't land a perfect hit, especially for 1.0 player. The story direction felt rough, exploration...
Yeah, voice acting, It ran terribly for some people. The pacing was all over the place. 1.0 was definitely rough. But I must admit, I am the opposite of people. Now, it had its issues with exploration in 1.0. But I think if we'd have just refined 1.0 with some cool utility rather than overpowering utility, I honestly think it would have been better personally. But I am in the minority when it comes to the bike tag. I know I am.
Wasn't nearly as fluid as it is today. Optimization had issues, and overall, the game clearly launched with problems.
Definitely.
But somehow, people stay. You stay. Why? Because Wuthering Waves didn't stand out just for the game itself, but also for developers' effort into making the game better over time.
I think that's fair. I do think, you know, in terms of... Now, this is... I've got to separate things here. Again, in terms of events, endgame and stuff for me, it didn't take the turn I wanted it to. But that's a personal thing. In terms of quality of life, I think so. Now, performance is still an issue to this day for a lot of people. But in terms of quality of life systems for the game, I think they were quick to really start working on things that people have asked for from a lot of other games that kind of dragged their feet with it, right? So I think that's a fair thing to say, definitely. In terms of... the rest of the game, though, yeah, in a lot of ways, definitely, yeah, but not so much in other ways as well for me.
To simply put, you didn't just play the game, you also watch it grow. From the clunky waves into second anniversary, from a Pizza Hut collab into Cyberpunk Edge Runner announced few hours ago. We can see the standard rising significantly, and over time, that creates something most live service games struggle to build: trust. You can see...
For me, with what we've seen from the recent collaboration around the corals, the way they're dealing with the actual currency stuff, the cost of dupes and that, I don't know if trust is necessarily the word I would use. I think they have shown themselves to desire better quality in many aspects of the game, though. But I don't... Wiwid doesn't necessarily have my trust, if I'm honest. It mainly came down to events for me. It really did. I just don't really trust Wiwid on the event side of things, and that's just a personal thing of, like, I like different things to what they're doing, right?
Many gacha games out there keep fixing their game, but never listen to what players wanted and slowly lose touch with what made people invested in the first place. Kuro managed to balance the rough launch with actually putting their foot on community shoes, so they understand what's up. That's some expensive things we have. By constantly improving the experience, listening to feedback, and refining the game patch after patch, Kuro slowly built the feeling that players actually mattered in the direction of the game. This is what people call player-centered design. Again, while the...
Ooh, player-centered design. I think you have to take that, and this is all gacha games, right? And all live service games to a degree. That statement has to be taken with a pinch of salt because, let's face it, the systems aren't necessarily designed with the player at the centre of them. They're designed to facilitate psychological triggers, right? They're designed to get you to do things repeatedly. FOMO's encouraged, you know what I mean? Just look at what they've done with the collab with the currency, right? Now, some people would argue, well, you can't expect them to let you have all the radiant tides you've saved up and use those, right? But it's led to silly little things happen. Now, don't get me wrong, the player who transferred all their asteroids into radiant tides, why did you do that? There was no need to. You should never do that, really, because that currency can be used for anything at any point. So I would never do that until you're actually doing the thing. But them not announcing that till, like, kind of close was definitely with the business in mind. It wasn't for the player, really, you know? Because if it was for the player, they would have just let you use the radiant tide you'd already got. But it wasn't, because they're here to make money. And, you know, that's when... the bank's at the centre of their thought process there, not the player, right? And this goes to pretty much every product, right? At the end of the day, when somebody's trying to sell you something, you know, they care about you to the point where you buy their product. Beyond that, it's about fucking enriching yourself, right? That's That's why you go into business, right? You don't do it to please people for the most part. Now, you could argue there's some different cases where people have passion projects, right? But you still have to keep the lights on, right? But for me, I think gacha games, by their very design, kind of shift from being player-centric anyway, personally. Now, they can do things that are a little bit more centered around the player in general, but I just argue by the very monetization, they kind of aren't, you know?
Experience is important because for me personally, I decided to try Wuo for the first time for the combat mechanism, but that's not what made me stay. The experience I got outside the game is because before Wuthering Waves, I played another gacha game for 4 years from day one, but didn't really feel they respect my time and
he's talking about Genshin.
Feedback. That's why I think Wuthering Wave got this far, not just because.
See, when I see these, and again, not judging this dude here at all. We can be respectful and disagree, right? We can have disagreements. When I see titles like this, Wuthering Waves is a huge wake up for your gacha. I think this is when I usually come to, what they're saying is, I like this game better than Genshin. You know? It's like, they're not talking about gacha games. They're talking about Hoyo games in specifically, right? Because usually the argumentation that I see used of, well, this is the best, this is the best, and this is the best. I think, well, actually, I can name a couple of games here that do all that better. But what they mean is, well, it's better than Genshin. Oh, that's better than Star Rail. Well, this is better than ZZZ. In general, it's better than Hoyo. That's usually what I think they're getting at, right?
It's new. It survived because it understood something many modern gacha games ignore. Experience itself creates identity. Kuro didn't blindly chase what makes other titles.
Let me take that back. Experience itself creates identity.
It's new. It survived because it understood something many modern gacha games ignore. Experience itself creates identity.
Experience itself creates identity. I guess so, yeah. That's a perception thing, really. Experience is a person's perception. Identity, though, I think a game can have its identity outside. Because an experience is a personal thing, right? You identify with something through your personal experience. I don't know if that's necessarily the same as something having an identity. But we're arguing semantics here.
Kuro didn't blindly chase what makes other titles success. Instead, they focus on understanding what makes most gacha fail. Because while many titles designed to feel comfortable, Wuthering Waves was designed to feel satisfying. They quickly adapt to what the community will enjoy, then build the game around enhancing that experience even further. The way
I think what they did is they took a tried and tested method of another game, Genshin, and tweaked it. I don't know if they necessarily did all this with the player in mind and came up with a design that was new, right? I'd argue that it is a comfortable game. It's Genshin Plus, right? It's Genshin Premium, if you will. I honestly believe, and again, they play differently. I'm not disrespecting the game in that sense, but I'm talking about the systems and a lot of the design that's gone into it in terms of the package as a whole. The game itself, I think, is a great game, right? And it is a different game to Genshin in that regard. But I would argue it is somewhat comfortable in its very essence, personally. I really would.
See it, they didn't just try to make a gacha, but an actual content that you can enjoy even if the gacha element was removed from it. You're losing me here. This is a gacha game through and through. Its content rollout is a gacha game. Its endgame is designed around gacha. Its story inherently is dragged down by the fact that it's a gacha. Characters appear and disappear and forgot about. Characters really don't get built upon the way they should. You've got a Marisu MC who is designed like that because it's a gacha game. I fundamentally disagree with this. I think Wuthering Waves would be an inherently different game if it wasn't a gacha game. And I'm not just talking about better scenery or better character model, but something you will appreciate after you actually get into the game. I will just take combat as example.
Okay.
Even years after it launched, combat still feels like the center of the game's identity. I mean, in 20...
I think that's fair. combat is a really important part of this game, yeah.
26,
I mean, that's a
good combat
fair.
in Gacha is not rare, but the impactful one is. Moreover,
Ooh, hold up. What does he mean by impactful?
back then, most
Does he
titles
mean literally it feels like it has impact? Because I agree with that, but impactful. We gotta let's unpack this. I need to know what he means.
only relied on build, while the rest of the mechanism is just a minor addition. And then now we can see, instead of turning every character into simple animation for bigger numbers, Wuthering Wave makes you actually understand how a character works.
That's literally what Wuthering Waves is. It's all about big number go burr. It's all about the most optimal rotation to get your DPS on screen to do as much damage as possible. Like, you genuinely don't really need to know the intricacies of kits, because there's not exactly much nuance to the kits, really, if you'd compare to the intricacies of playing a stage in something like Arknights or even Limbus. Or, man, you guys could probably throw a bunch of games out there, gacha games as well. I think inherently action gacha games tend to be a little bit more simplistic compared to their counterparts, because it's more about mechanics more than anything. The skill expression comes from the player, typically through mechanics, right? Reactions and stuff like that, and efficient meta, rather than understanding of enemies, kits, synergies to a deep level. You know what I mean? Like, when I look at the kits in Limbus, I'm like, what the fuck? Right? I'm still nowhere near getting it yet, right? Like, I've just got over the intricacies of the combat, which is the combat alone without the kits, way more intricate. Then you look at something like Arknights, the amount of variant or variety and different ways of playing the same stage is insane in Arknights. Like, insane. I don't think any other gacha game even comes close in that regards, in that you can clear a stage in Arknights, go and watch somebody else clear it and be like, holy shit, they're doing totally different things. You know what I mean? Not even just down to, oh, there's a slight different rotation, or they're using a different DPS or a slight different team, but they're doing the same thing. In Arknights, they're doing totally different things, right? And the uniqueness to how people clear stages is incomparable. Now, of course, I know people, when they're talking about this, I will give them the benefit of the doubt, they're not taking into account those other games. But as I say, and we're arguing semantics, when you use words like gacha games, we're talking about gacha games, and there's many gacha games that have much more depth than games like Wua and games like Genshin and games like ZZZ and Star Rail. Now, I don't know, man. Does Genshin have more depth in terms of it's? I don't know. I'm not an expert in regards to Genshin, right? I'll stop playing it in Azuma, but yeah, this is definitely not unique to Wuthering Waves or special about Wuthering Waves.
Let's not talk about Imeth or other newly released unique. Even Dungeon is not an easy character to play with. There's a system you need to understand for a better result. Moreover, with the new Toon Brick system, it just adds more things for you to manage. The skill ceiling is not just about swapping in and out, but when you get the grip, everything is paid off. Dodge, parry, even small movement feel rewarding. That's why people who already quits the game often still say the combat is insanely good, because
I agree. The combat is. I do genuinely think the combat is good in Wuthering Waves. I do, but yeah, I think I disagree with this. I think it is built around big number go burr. I really do. There's no real build variety in Wuthering Waves. And this is one thing that I said I would have loved in Enfield as well, which I was disappointed about. I would love potential subclasses, the ability to build out, right? You know, to have a unit become tanky in the way you build them out with the gear that you use, potentially allowing characters to move faster, move slower, but take more damage, do different things so they mechanically feel different. At the end of the day, I don't think, but there is no build variety. There is. It's which stats do you need the most? Build into those, right? Whether it's all about energy regen, crit, ult, whatever it might be. It's it's kind of it's basically that, right?
It left an impression. I mean, in modern gacha development, creating something...
And I must say, that doesn't mean bad. I'm not saying that this makes Wua bad. I'm by no means saying that. But this is where I go back to this thing when I talk about sometimes the Wuthering Waves community is like the Arsenal fan base, where they describe things that many other games do as like it's never been done before, and that everything they do is the best version of it, and I just fundamentally disagree with that.
Completely original is almost impossible. Most mechanics already exist in some form, so uniqueness is not just about inventing entirely new ideas, but also reshaping familiar ideas into experience other games never have before. And that is where Wuthering Waves become important for the gacha industry itself, because contrary to what people expected during launch,
I will say, do you know where Wuthering Waves has become exceptionally important for the gacha space? In pushing production quality up. Honestly, I'd argue that goes back to Genshin. They proved that investing money into your title can make you lots of money, right? If you want, like, you know, close to AAA kind of graphics and that production, games like Genshin and Wuthering Waves and Zenless and Enfield, they're important because other games that come along then have to compete in terms of that production quality. But let's also remember, graphics don't make a good game either, do they? Wuthering Waves is a good game, but I'm just saying, you know, a good game's a good game, whether it's got bad graphics, good graphics, or a particular art style, right?
Wuthering Waves didn't become a killer for other games, but something much more like a pressure point that affects the next generation of gacha games.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I do think that's fair. But I think it solely comes down to production quality. I don't think there's a pressure point on Azure Premilia and Silver Palace and NTE, even though NTE kind of did switch things up in terms of how they handle the gacha. I don't think there is because it's a Huyo system. It literally is. It's the Huyo system, but a little bit better. I don't think in terms of the way they deal with events is unique enough that it's going to push that forward. I don't think the Endgame is going to push Endgame forward. Like, let's not pretend Tower of Adversity is going to make the next game go, hoo, that was insane. Let's do one better. If anything, it's going to make games comfortable around a lot of the things that make games for me. Do you know what I mean? Like, production quality and gacha for me is less important than a game being good. And Wua is a good game, but it's got a lot of hangovers that every other gacha game has, and it hasn't done them any differently than pretty much all of gacha. If I'm honest, there's nothing that's really stand out about what Wuthering Waves do in terms of being like, wow, okay, damn, you know? I don't think so. And again, doesn't mean it's bad, right? I think I disagree with this argumentation.
More than people realize. I'm not saying every future game will be Wuthering Waves copy, no, but it would definitely help to shift the standard slowly, because players now start expecting something better, which developers do not stick to the traditional system inside and outside of the game.
Again, it's that there, right? He had me in the first half. I do agree. They are kind of a flag bearer for quality. I think them, Enfield and ZZZ are the flag bearers for quality now. If you want to look better than them, you got to step your game up, right? But the other stuff, I don't see how they're doing it any differently, personally. I really don't.
They want a responsive developer that actually react to the community instead of just following a fixed roadmap for years. And we can see how it starts.
I think they are following a fixed roadmap for years. I don't think the game's had any majorly drastic changes because people have disliked something. There might be tweaks, of course, but yeah, I don't think there's been major changes. I haven't played the most recent update, so maybe.
Starts to become a thing in gacha space. More games have better exploration, better gacha system, better QoL, even more responsive developer.
But I don't think that's down to Wua, because Wua didn't set the world ablaze with its gacha system, did it? It didn't. It's Genshin. It's the Genshin system with 10 less and a guaranteed weapon, which is an improvement, right? Or, you know, really, a game that will potentially in the gacha system be something that really drives things is maybe NTE. If NTE is super successful, right, maybe other companies will look and go, shit, maybe we need to drop 50/50s. Maybe we need to start throwing skins into part of the gacha rewards and stuff, you know what I mean? Maybe skins in general need to be much more important to us. Because to me, if every game does WoW and copies WoW in terms of that stuff, then there'll be not much progression, or it'll be a snail's pace. Maybe they'll do 70, you know? Or maybe they'll do 80, 50/50, and you can pull the weapon in 50 pulls, 60 pulls, and it's a guarantee. You know what I mean? I don't think it's really moved the needle massively in that regard. Like, this is what I say. In terms of the game itself, the core part, I think it's great. But I think everything else is just gacha. It just is just gacha.
Because, let's be real, standing still and being so hard-headed in modern gacha space means left behind, especially with how players are now no longer there just to play, but also to compare.
Because, like, a perfect example for me, like, you might dislike it, and that's fair, right? Enfield introduced the factory system as a new way to gear, to account progress, to get certain things that you need in the game, right? And the people who claimed that this was so unique, not all of them, and I'm paraphrasing and I'm extrapolating a little bit here, would argue that that sucks about Enfield as well. You know what I mean? Like, and you could argue there's a lot of people out there that claim that we were so unique, but they genuinely really do like the comfortability of the game, you know? Because I've said this before, there's a large portion of the WoW fan base that are ex-Genshin players, right? They just wanted Genshin, but better. And they've kind of got that, haven't they? With Wuthering Waves. So I don't think they wanted anything too different. And that was smart from Kuro. Kuro noticed Genshin's massive. Maybe if we just do that in terms of the model and everything else and dial it up a bit, we'll probably make bank. And hey, they were right. Right. Props to them. They've killed it. And, like, they've deserved, I think they have deserved every ounce of success, personally. Again, most of my critiques when it comes to Wuthering Waves, I do have critiques on the game, but it's more the way the community like the game is doing so much more than what other games are doing. And I really don't think that's true. Maybe apart from the production quality, but then we've got Enfield and ZZZ, right? But in terms of everything else, I think it's kind of just, yeah, it's muddying along. It really is.
So, what I'm trying to say, Wuthering Waves didn't get this far just because they're new than some other competitors.
No, that's
but
true.
Because it broke the old loop. They choose identity over familiarity,
I disagree.
which is what gacha space needs.
I disagree. The game is incredibly familiar. It is incredibly familiar. It is. I don't necessarily think WoW's identity is the main factor of its success. I really don't.
It at that time. Not only it creates name for themselves, it also forced the entire gacha space to realize doing the bare minimum is not an option. The newer gacha games are now trying to come up with something new every time. We see more unique combat, exploration, ability, even the QL we rarely see back.
But are we seeing unique combat in the space at the moment? I'd argue we're not. We are in the age of rotation slot, right? Even though I do like Silver Palace's combat, it needs a lot of work, and they need to work on adding stuff to the parry because it's far too powerful. I need other ways to combat damage. I want risk to stuff, just as Vulpes said. But, you know, look at Azure Familiar. You know, look at Silver Palace. Look at NTE. It's very samey, right? You know, you can like all of those games. I'm not saying those games are bad. Like, I'm not saying we was bad.
In the early days of gacha competition. Again, it's not new, but it shows that market keep changing every time. Because at the end of the day, people stay for what the game has become, not for what it was.
That's true.
But what
That's
do
true.
you think? Do you think Wuthering Waves is a wake-up call for the gacha community? Let us know in the comment section. So, that's all for today. Thanks for watching.
Do I think Wuthering Waves is a wake-up call for the gacha community? Yes and no. I think yes, in terms of quality, production value, scope, scale, I think they've all improved, and I think it's one of the best. As again, I've said it before, ZZZ, Enfield, Wua are like the best looking gacha games, right? Visual fidelity, how they're animated, the models, the character models themselves, the animations, all that sort of stuff is like probably as good as it gets in terms of the AAA like feel, right? But in regards to the rest of it, nah, has it really blown everything out the water in terms of endgame? No. Has it really blown everything out the water in terms of events? No. Do you gear and level your characters like many other gacha games? Yeah. Arguably, the ecosystem is worse than many other gacha games, in my opinion, because it fucking blows. I really do believe that. It was such a cool system when it first dropped, and then everything just gets made redundant anyway, because the way main echoes work, which was a shame. Like, I really thought the ecosystem would have been something ingenious when we first played, and it still is a cool way to do gear, right? But it's a frustrating system to work with. The gacha, it's nothing different. The way they do content drops, exactly the same. The way they handle story, just like a lot of other gacha games. I really don't think Wuthering Waves is this unicorn in the gacha space that does it differently. Now, you can argue, because this is more subjective, does it do it better? That's a fair argument to make, right? Because there's a lot of people would say, well, I think it does all of those things better. But I don't think it's in any way different or unique to most things in the gacha space. I honestly don't. Like, when I think of unique gacha games, for me, and they all have the same overhangs that these other gacha games have, right, in terms of the way you level, the way you gear, and all this sort of stuff. But for me, I think of Limbus Company, I think of Art Knights, I think of Reverse 1999, right, that feel a little bit different. I'd even argue somewhat Zenless feels quite a different game. It's got a lot of its own issues as well. And I'd argue Enfield also, as well. And I suppose you could argue some stuff about NTE is definitely different, right? You know, the slice of life stuff, and whether you love it or hate it, right? Do they need to improve on all that stuff? Yes. But the activity side of things in NTE, I think, is somewhat unique to most other games. It's not unique in gaming, but in the gacha space, maybe. But Wuthering Waves, to me, I wouldn't call it a unique game. It's a good game that I think will improve production quality in the gacha space, but I don't think it's moving the needle in terms of gacha. I honestly don't. But I'd love to know what you guys think about this. I know I'm probably going to get a lot of pushback if this goes up as a video, because people don't like my Wuthering Waves opinions. Although I do like the game, they think it's just a pure hater standpoint. It's genuinely not. It's just I like to talk about video games, and I think I differ in a lot of regards to how people consider Wuthering Waves and how they gas it up. I must admit, vocal minorities of the Kuro bot community are the Arsenal fan base. If you don't know football, go and have a look on Twitter at the Arsenal community, and you'll probably understand why people like to banter a little bit, because of some similarities. But yeah, I'd love to know what you think anyway.